Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. We have a really nice sized group here, and I know that we'll have some more folks jumping in as we get started, which we will do in just a minute. Just wanting to ask you all, if you have a chance while we're waiting for others to join us, to answer this question, which I just placed in the chat. So can you please type where you're joining from today and how many people are watching with you? We'd love to know who's in the room. I'm gonna also really look forward to a great conversation with all of you. Where are you joining from today? How many people are watching with you? Love to know that. Thanks, and we will start in just a minute. Great, Amy's here from Chicago. We've got Woodridge, Chicago. Great, Sarah, Pamela, excellent. Vanessa, thanks for joining us from Chicago. Liz, we've got San Antonio, thank you. Westchester, Milwaukee, Wheaton, Darien, Westridge, Wakanda, Elk Grove. We got some Oak Park and we got some Hyde Park. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Samantha. So glad you're with us today. Edison Park is representing. Thanks, Bridget. Jennifer and Elmhurst, glad you're here. Awesome. So you guys can keep letting us know where you are coming in from and how many are with you. But for the moment, I will get us started. So just really wanting to wish everybody a good morning. It's a sunny, beautiful morning here in the Chicago area. I'm Anna Garcia Doyle, the Executive Director of the One Earth Film Festival, and I want to welcome you to our virtual screening and discussion of Mariposa, which will be preceded by a 22-minute short film, Biomimicry. This presentation is co-hosted by Triton College in River Grove, Illinois. And like so many other events, this one's original context was upended by the pandemic. So its date, which was planned for March, and its location, Triton's state-of-the-art auditorium. We're glad to be able to finally proceed virtually today, though, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank Nancy Rizzo and her team for their continued partnership over the years and for helping make this event possible. I would now like to hand it over to Nancy just to make her own brief welcome on behalf of Triton College. Nancy.
Good morning, my name is Nancy Rizzo and I am the co-chair of the Greening the Campus Committee at Triton College. The Greening the Campus Committee seeks to serve the community by promoting sustainability and reducing the ecological footprint. And I hope you enjoy the film and thank you for joining us.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you again, Nancy. We anticipate this morning will present rich opportunities for learning and provide a brave and safe space for critical conversation around issues that matter deeply at this time in our nation and in our world. This year's festival theme was and is still the power of we, reminding us in this pandemic and election year that we can make change for our planet, both individually and collectively. One Earth's mission is to utilize the power of film to spark awareness and action on issues of environment and topics intersected with environment, including social justice. One way that mission is perhaps reflected is in this quote, which I love, and if you've been with us for screenings throughout the week, you've already heard it, but hopefully it really still resonates with you. The quote is, "I always wondered why somebody didn't do something about that, and then I realized I am somebody." That is our invitation to you today, among other things, to realize that you are somebody and that you can do something. So our morning will take place in 4 parts. We're welcoming you now, and soon we'll introduce you to some folks who will help us have a great discussion after the film. Right before we view the film, our AV lead, Garen, will share some quick Zoom basics. For now, just please know that we should all be muted unless we're called upon to speak, and that we'll be using the chat for questions and discussion. We're then gonna watch the film together via Zoom's screen share feature. We're gonna have a facilitated discussion with our wonderful panelists about the film and its themes, and one of those folks is one of the subjects of the second film we're gonna view. And so, yeah, the themes in this film also include social and environmental justice. The last part of our time together will be spent on sharing some concrete actions you can use to help in the topic areas of the film and discussion shared by our panelists, as well as our action partners, Wild Ones West Cook and Triton College campus screening team. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and our program participants. If you're active on social media, please, please tell people that this is happening. Amplify the community that we are building here right now. I would now like to introduce Susan Lucci, our discussion facilitator for today. Susan is the founder of Too Big for Words and co-founder of Global Purpose Guides and Feel Real. She loves facilitating the fests, which she has done since year 2. When it's not Fest Week, you will find Susan facilitating transformational conversations in a unique circle model that she developed a decade ago and guiding people to activate their purpose. We're so grateful to you, Susan, for once again playing the role of facilitator for a One Earth Film Festival event. Thank you so much. Handing it off to you now.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here. Today we're going to be unpacking issues of justice regards to our environment, how we treat each other as human beings, and how we consider our shared resources on this planet Earth. No small topics today, but we come at it, one of the reasons I love participating with One Earth is that we come at it with hope, with an active kind of hope and looking toward a hopeful future supported by the actions that we take. So I am thrilled to be here to help guide a conversation with 2 amazing women and 2 just powerful, beautiful films. Beautiful. And so I think I want to move on to the agreements. Before we begin, if we were all together in one room, these would be especially important. And I think on a Zoom call, they are as well. And so I'm going to invite you to really take these in as we approach our conversation together. So to be respectful, to really see each other and listen without any kind of preconceptions, just let go, be curious, be open to what you might learn, what you might hear that is new or renewed again. We acknowledge our privilege in these spaces and use I statements. Part of this is practicing our story and internalizing what we're learning and what we have learned. To me, really rich, juicy conversations are most of all practices of active listening. So it's all right to take a pause, right? And really take this in. Each of us will speak just one at a time. The power of the mute button, I guess. We'll all be muted unless you're called on to speak. We'll have an active chat, which is another place that you can speak and where I really invite you to practice these agreements of respect and curiosity. Beautiful. So if you haven't already, put in the chat where you're from, how many are watching, and I'd like to know why you came this morning too. So just pop that in the chat. What drew you to these films on this day in October? Great films. Thanks, Colleen. Yep, and here to support the Film Fest, sustainability. An extra credit project. All right, I love that. Thanks to those teachers who are seeing this, wanting to see these great films. Beautiful. Yeah, growing some milkweed and wanting to know what others are doing. How can we support butterflies? Loving to learn. Beautiful, beautiful reasons why. And maybe you'll learn more about that as we watch the films and get into the conversation. So as said, One Earth Film Fest is about more than the films. We are really obvious, I think, in our intention about moving you to action. And one of the ways we do this is through thought-provoking dialogue. And so I hope you'll stay with us today. We have 2 films, and so we're gonna have the first film, Biomimicry, and then some conversation, and then we'll roll out Mariposa and followed up by more conversation. So I'd like to introduce to entice you to stay, these wonderful women that I'm just getting to know that will be with us. Amy Phillips is the founder of Biomimicry Chicago, and also the youth programs manager of the Conservation Foundation. I don't know if we want to spotlight Amy. She can wave at us. I know she's here in our Zoom room. There she is. All right, Amy, thanks for being with us today. And we also have Marianna Treviño Wright, the executive director of the National Butterfly Center. And an activist. So just thrilled to have her zooming on in to be with us today. I got to meet her at the opening night of the fest way back in March, and it was one of the highlights of my year. So beautiful, thanks for being here. And since Amy's here, I'd love to have you introduce our first film, Biomimicry. This film is just 22 minutes long. It was made back in 2015. Amy, what else would you say about biomimicry before we get to watch it?
Sure. Well, biomimicry, I was drawn to it. I was trained as an architect, and it was one of those things that I've always been interested in ecology and the intersection of ecology and design. And I happened to find, actually I was working in New York at the time, and Janine Benyus, who was the founder of this movement and wrote a book called Biomimicry. And she actually was in our office, and I heard her speak, and I was completely amazed. And it's one of those things that once you hear it, once you're exposed to it, you fall in love. So hopefully everyone will enjoy the film.
What a just beautiful film. Just to remind you who we have here, Amy Kaufman Phillips was trained as an architect, which I'm going to ask her about, seeks to build connections between people and nature through design, as a network leader at Biomimicry Chicago and as the youth program manager for the Conservation Foundation. Thanks for being here, Amy. And Marianna Treviño Wright is the executive director of the National Butterfly Center, right there on the US-Mexico border in Mission, Texas. She is one of the most vocal anti-border wall activists in the country. Woo! Her fierce determination and intensive efforts were recognized by the Defenders of Wildlife, who selected her to receive their 2019 Spirit of Defenders Award for Conservation Advocacy. So thanks for spending this morning with us, watching this film together. Amy, I'm gonna start with you if it's all right. Curious how your training as an architect informs your conservation work, your education work, your activism. Can you build that bridge for us?
Sure. I like that you use building bridges, because in many ways I see that as my primary purpose in some ways. I started as an architect. I've always had an affinity for design. I love design. I love creating things, solving problems, you know, that kind of thing. But I always had this thread of environmental activism, of environmentalism. How do I bring that into my work as an architect? And so it's always, you know, most of you, I don't know how many of you have taken a science class since you were in high school, but those of us trained in architecture don't. We take a lot of history, we take a lot of physics, structures, math, art, but we don't take science. And I always, you know, the more I got into this work, the more I was fascinated by the fact that we were charged with building structures that live within these environments, both human constructed and natural environments, but yet we don't really fully understand how those processes work. So a lot of what I got into when I got into this field of biomimicry was really start to build those bridges. How do we have designers understand science enough and ecology enough in order to build structures that live within those existing natural environments, instead of just sitting on top of them, really live within. And, you know, like Janine always says, our mantra is always, life creates conditions conducive to life. So how do we create designs and structures that do the same?
That's beautiful. And Isabel says, you know, even scientists have a lot to learn. I'm one, and I've learned so much in 22 minutes. Yahoo, I love that. I love that.
It is true. I mean, just to kind of follow up on that, you know, the scientists, I went to this program, I did a master's degree in biomimicry, and it was purposely designed to have equal parts designers, engineers, scientists, and, you know, and business people. And then having that cross-disciplinary collaboration really helped us kind of break down those walls. Because if you go into science, if you go into design, you speak a certain language. You know, I could speak as an architect. I learned to speak shorthand. So I could talk to other architects. All my friends in college were architects. I married an architect, right? Like, we sort of live in these silos. And going through this biomimicry program, what was fascinating is I had to learn to speak a different language. I had to learn to speak the language of science so that I could communicate effectively. And then they had to learn the language of design as well. So really, you know, kind of breaking down those silos and fostering that interdisciplinary collaboration, that's really how the change happens. And that's, I think, at its core, really what biomimicry is all about.
I agree. In fact, I noted that I feel like biomimicry is, or this curiosity around it, inviting in this different way perhaps of listening and looking, is such an antidote to Zoom fatigue, for example, right? I was thinking like, oh my gosh, look at this different way and these operating instructions right here. So I wondered for each of you, I'll start with Mariana and then go to Amy, is how do you personally stay connected to the natural world? I know once you become an activist, right, there's so much advocacy and online and all of this, but I'm curious how each of you practice whatever that stirs in you of looking and listening to the natural world.
I took the job I have now so that I could spend all the time that I have left in the natural world, because it is such an amazing, beautiful, instructional, creative, healing, energizing, place. And I don't get to do that much anymore. The last 3 years have been, I feel like that's been stripped from me. And, Amy's film is, I was sitting here crying. It's so beautiful. And I can't wait to use it. Our public education system has changed dramatically over the last, 80, 100 years, from the little red schoolhouse that children used to walk to I'll use silos again, as Amy did, but these are pretty bad silos that we warehouse our children in. And being an advocate for traditional field education at a time where everyone is touting STEM, the tensions are incredible. We have school superintendents who want their kids to go on field trips to Peter Piper Pizza, but not come to the National Butterfly Center. And so I launched a campaign with one of these superintendents where every week I send him a different TED Talk on the natural world and how much as a society and as a species we have derived from it. So I'm going to use biomimicry that way too. But I send him TED Talks on bees and bats and vultures and cockroaches, which are the model for nano robots now and everything, and to try to prove to him the value of the natural world. It's insane that we have to do that now, that we're so alienated from it, that people are talking about STEM, science, technology, engineering, art, math, and they don't know the place from which it all derives.
Beautiful. And we will see in the next film, we will see Mariana looking and listening and touching, another beautiful film to come. Amy, how about you? How do you personally stay connected to the natural world?
Well, I am extraordinarily lucky in what I do because I work for the Conservation Foundation, which is a land trust. And I get to be outside with kids talking about nature, showcasing nature, touching, feeling, having them just be immersed in it. And so much of what we do derives on kids having that initial experience, as a child, to be connected. I am in this work, I firmly believe, because I got to spend so much time wandering the little scrub woodland behind my parents' house as a kid. And because I have that connection, because I felt that as a child, I bring that into my work. And so even when I went into this highly STEM field, I always brought that connection back with me. And, we use STEM. It's a core part of the work that we do, because STEM isn't just robots. It is getting kids outside and kids having that experience of being connected to the land, of understanding the principles of what they're seeing, and then starting to embody that in their lives. And so I am just so fortunate to be able to have that be part of my job, that I get to go outside and, showcase this amazing place with, kids all around our area, and also, get to talk to adults about the same thing. And I one of the things that, you always look for silver linings. And one of the silver linings, I think, of this last 6-7 months has been people are really, they feel gratitude to be outside, and they have the opportunity to be outside in ways that they haven't before. So, and the one thing that they always tell us whenever we're training as naturalists is there's no such thing as bad weather. There's only such thing as bad clothing. So stock up on those warm clothing, and don't forget to get outside this winter too.
This is a perfect time of year for us to hear that. Yeah. Great. I think just another question or two before we go on to the next film. I like Janine just almost subtly shares at one point that this is an Apollo project worth pursuing, right? Which to me is just like, wow, the energy, what that harkens back to. So I'm wondering, how can we elevate this wisdom of mimicking life's genius, of really apprenticing to the masters? Do either of you have ideas? And I'm so appreciative that you are on the ground and doing so much around this. But how did that kind of invitation to vision, how do you respond to that, either of you, both of you?
I guess I'll start. I mean, the one thing that I think we all have to combat is there's just so many calls for our attention, right? And even, one of the action items that I'll talk about, I guess, at the end is to go outside. But one of the activities that we always have people do is have something, we call it quieting our cleverness, right? Like when you go outside, what are you thinking about? Are you checking your phone? Are you thinking about what project you're working on? Are you thinking about what's going on with your kids, or are you, from the scientist angle, what is this plant? What is the biological name for this, or the botanical name? And, one of the things that we always try to get people to do, which is so, so challenging, is just to quiet that cleverness, to try to quiet your brain and just go outside almost in a meditative state and just try to experience it. Because that's always, people say they get their best ideas in the shower. It's because they're not thinking about anything. And so if you can go outside and just try not to think and just try to experience and feel and be, then, that sometimes those kind of inspirations can come in, and, just try to amplify this message as much as you can. There's so many really great online programs, online courses. The University of Phoenix, hold on. I'm going to get it mixed up. The University of Phoenix? No. Which is the one that's in Arizona? ASU. That is the one that, they actually have master's degrees and things like that in biomimicry. So if you are interested in that, please check all of that information out, because, but just start. You can start, read a book. Biomimicry.
That's wonderful. And just get outside. Yeah, right. It's amazing how healing and uplifting. Yeah. Mariana, how about you? How do we elevate this? How do we spread this? I hear some of you spreading the TED Talk, that kind of thing. Is this an Apollo project worth pursuing?
It's absolutely worth pursuing. In the age of COVID, how we share this, has got to be, like Amy said, read a book, take online courses. Obviously, we'll share this on Facebook and Twitter and put it on screen in the pavilion at the National Butterfly Center. We can promote it through our e-newsletter, but it's the kind of stuff that we used to do in very hands-on ways with school field trips. And we've lost that opportunity, at least temporarily, to show and tell in a present, physically interactive manner that's not virtual like this. So I guess that's all I can think of right now for how we share, is we've got to keep pushing it on digital fronts.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think the biomimicry of simple, but also the abundance, right? In as we will see in your film coming up, about how many eggs a butterfly lays, right? Just the seeding of certain plants, even as you look at the milkweed, right? Just think of that abundance. And I think of that sometimes when I have an idea and I pass it on and it doesn't land like I think, be like nature. We've got to just keep seeding this, and seeding this till we actually create these conditions that are conducive to life and move us forward. Beautiful. I'd love to, we'll move on to the next film now. If there was something in that film that surprised or excited you that you'd like to put in the chat, we consider that part of our harvest here as well. But thank you so much, Amy and Mariana. I'm going to bring you on again. But for now, Mariana, would you please introduce the next film for us?
Oh my. And Amy's film is so hopeful and exciting. And I almost feel like Mariposa is a counterpoint to that at this time. We all understand that the current occupant of the White House came to power on a campaign rooted in xenophobia, in racism, in lies, and his foundational promise was that he would build a wall across the entire southern border of the United States. And I think a lot of people bought into that, and for whatever reason, they thought it was a good idea, not understanding the real world implications of desecrating habitats, vibrant but fragile habitats over 1,900 miles of some of the richest ecosystems that we have on the planet. And so our community began to mobilize after President Trump was elected. And what I discovered one day in July in 2017 sort of was the lightning strike that galvanized a no border wall movement along the southern border. That is something we are still doing today. Krista, the filmmaker, came to the Rio Grande Valley for the first big no border wall march. It was the March to Save mission, and that was a Saturday. And on Sunday, there was the March to Save Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge. She came as a photographer and filmmaker with a career in conservation. And she says the idea struck there that, she had to document this. And Mariposa is born of that. She met me and she met Zulema, another woman, an activist, an immigrant, a migrant farm worker, who has fought for all sorts of improvements, quality of life issues, civil rights issues, and the border wall is very much one of those things. It has to do with our civil rights, with environmental justice, with our quality of life, with natural resource conservation, and the weaving of our stories, mine, Zulema's, and that of the butterfly together is Krista's brainchild, and it is so richly illustrated and beautifully done that I hope everyone gets a couple of tissues ready and sits down to enjoy the film.
Absolutely. Oh, thanks, Mariana. That was beautiful. So the film is just under an hour, and we'll hand it over to Garen to get it rolling. And then please stay afterwards for the conversation, bringing back Amy and Mariana. Oh, that was so beautiful. Truth be told, I said yes to Anna to facilitate this film before I watched it. So, wow. So I'm going to invite Mariana and Amy into the screen, into our chat here. Wish we were together for a group hug. So powerful. I think even the opening, I love that juxtaposition of the feminine, right? All of that, the definitions of butterflies and even the psyche, the soul, and then the movement to that image of the wall, the immovable, the cement, you know, which is flies in the face of the wisdom from our first film, right? Oh, so that's the most powerful scene or image. Mariana, I don't even know what to ask you to start, except a big, just like gratitude and a bow to your fierce heart. What's it like to watch this over and over with us and in this work? What's it like
I cry every time, to be honest. And partly that's the PTSD, and partly it's the fact that I'm still living it every day. This is my waking, sleeping, dreaming reality, is this battle. And, you know, we've got to have change in the White House, but everyone would be incredibly naive to believe that that is going to change the goals of our government, where immigration, energy policy, climate change, and national security all come together, and they converge along with policy for profit in the border wall, which, you know, the border wall really has almost nothing to do with keeping people, drugs, or weapons out of the country. Even the Department of Homeland Security admits the majority of all of that comes through legal ports of entry. The border wall is about land seizure, the largest private property grab in modern history. And, you know, Krista was with me in Washington, D.C. at least twice, maybe 3 or 4 times. And I have to tell everyone, do not ever assume that your congressmen and women know what's happening, that they really know the issues or what they're voting for or against. When I testified before the congressional committee, one of the Republican representatives, after I was done, said, "Wait, we're taking private property to build border wall?" And I said, you know, yes, how could you not know that? And that was his pause, you know, as a Republican, was he couldn't believe that this required and that they were actively engaged in seizing private property, something that used to be sacrosanct. So we all have to be engaged, and I know that this election is critical and that people are hoping that Biden and Harris will bring about radical change. But Obama did not stop border wall construction or the fulfillment of all of the contracts executed under Bush. Obama, in the 2 years where he had a Democrat-controlled Congress, did not enact meaningful immigration reform. And, you know, he put DACA in place, which is a limbo for those folks in temporary protected status. They are chronically vulnerable and at risk. He deported more people than any president before him. I could go on. And we are going, if we want something different, we are going to have to apply an insane and relentless amount of pressure to Biden and Harris and Congress to get change. And that's going to be really hard to break through on this front when we're in the midst of this global pandemic. And I live somewhere where it's, you know, it's warm, hot most of the time. So while homelessness is horrible, it's not life-threatening like it would be in some place like Chicago. And when we're looking at record unemployment, the prospect of people going hungry and, you know, evictions and homelessness like this country has never seen before, border wall is going to be on the back burner. And I think that's, you know, something we all need to understand.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thanks, Mariana, so much. And I think you're already giving us, for anybody that's taking notes, our first action steps. We always want you to walk away with things you can do, right? So to vote, and then as Laurie's telling us what, you know, she's hearing from Mariana is, we've got to be in conversation with our elected officials to educate them, be educated ourselves and educate them, and not make assumptions. I love that. Amy, I'd love to get your fresh response to the film, having just seen it. And then I've got lots of questions about wanting to know updates, is the construction continuing, those kind of things. But Amy, I'd love to hear from you on just having seen this film.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's obviously it's an extraordinarily powerful film. You know, I guess my initial takes were, you know, the importance of conservation and how do we get that to be something that is valued, and how do we get that to be something that isn't just over there, but it's something that we do not only in the wildlife reserves, but also within our own yards and everything like that. And then also, how do we start to build community? You know, you know, like one of the things when I was thinking about what are the threads between the two films are the importance of conservation, because going back to what Janine said, how do you take care of the place that takes care of the children, right? And that is that creating conditions conducive to life. You know, we always think about nature and protecting nature, but it really is about protecting the people. And that, because we are a part of nature, right? Like, and that's something that we always forget, or not all of us, but we can forget that we are a part of nature, and it isn't just something that's over there. That, you know, the air we breathe, the water we drink, all of that is closely, so closely tied to the quality of the environments in which we live. And also the importance of diversity. You know, I think, like, we talked about the diversity, she talked about the diversity of caterpillars and how that is so important to, you know, the biodiversity of the region as well. But, you know, the importance of diversity also resonates within our human communities as well.
Yeah, and I think of that beautiful quote from the first film about there is a hidden unity, right, underlying the diversity too, just as we're listening and learning, becoming biomimicists or whatever we would be. All right, Mariana, they are eager to know, Cheryl says, what's the update on the wall in the center, and is construction continuing? Can you fill us in? I know it's heartbreaking.
I'd like to answer those after I add to what Amy just said, if I may, which is about protecting the places that sustain the people. At root in the border wall policy is the death sentence, not just for those places, but for people. And what our policy of building border barriers has done is force people into more and more dangerous, life-threatening places as they attempt to flee and move to some place where they can be safe. Border barriers are directly responsible for an increase of thousands of human deaths. And we have over 1,000 plant and animal species at risk of extinction because of border barrier. So the people and the places and, you know, the planet are intimately tied together. And the border wall is just one example that brings this into focus, I think. So I wanted to say that. And then regarding construction, oh my gosh, it's so I found the contractors on the property more than 9 months before any congressional vote or appropriation authorizing and funding border wall. Then in 2019, in that Department of Homeland Security spending bill, Congress exempted us from border wall construction with congressionally appropriated funds. And there is the rub. So on February 15th, President Trump signed that spending bill enacted by Congress with bipartisan support, which also funded loads more border wall. And then the day after that, he declared the state of emergency, whereby he could take funds not congressionally appropriated for border wall and reprogram them for border wall construction. So we're not safe, and border wall construction right now is occurring on both sides of us, working toward us. We have no doubt, I would say we are 99% sure that before he leaves office, Trump will execute a construction contract for a border wall to be built through us. And that means us and the other exempted places, La Lomita, Benson, Rio Grande Valley State Park, Santa Ana. The one place that may actually remain exempted would be Boca Chica Beach, where Elon Musk has built SpaceX. And he built that on a beach that is a protected area for endangered nesting sea turtles and next door to a national wildlife refuge, which he has now set on fire twice. So that's where we stand. And then of course, last year we had the president's proxies show up, Steve Bannon and Brian Colfage and Tommy Fisher, the two of the three currently federally indicted fraudsters in the We Build the Wall scam. And they did build 3 miles of private border wall just adjacent to us.
Wow. So you mentioned that you don't spend as much time there. So are you primarily advocating at this point? How has your role, I'm thinking of that intention, and I do want to uplift. I love that the transformation we see with the wild onion, the commercial wild onion fields, and somehow, I have no idea how you did that. And then to the plant that in itself brings, 50 different butterflies, right? That, I guess practicing active hope, hold on to things like that. Like, how did Mariana do that? And how do we take that along with the inspiration of the Mariposas themselves, traveling thousands of miles? So how are you embodying that now, Mariana?
So with regard to not being at the center as much, there are a couple of things. We have 2 lawsuits ongoing, one against the administration and the Department of Homeland Security, and one against the proxies, the We Build the Wall people. Both of those are moving forward to trial now. So that involves a lot of lawyer calls and media interactions, and so much of that used to be done at the center, but now I can do it from home. And I do a lot more at home since all of this started, and the death threats and the other things have come up, because honestly, I'm just as afraid of Border Patrol and the police and the harassment and the threats and everything that they have brought as I am by the stochastic terrorists and the militia who have shown up at the National Butterfly Center and others. And so my house has become sort of a fortress. And
Wow.
and so I work from home a whole lot more. Now, on holding on to hope, we just had an announcement that the French company that was going to be executing a multi-billion-dollar contract with an LNG plant at the Port of Brownsville has canceled that contract. Wow. That may sound like a random announcement, but one of the things that the border wall is about pipeline. It's about the federal government seizing all of this private property and building the defense mechanism for pipeline, this border wall, so that pipeline can be run along the borderlands and especially from West Texas to the Port of Brownsville. There, they are currently dredging the port to make it deep enough for the LNG terminals, and in the process of permitting 3 new LNG terminals. And in July, well, let me even backtrack. With border wall, people have asked a million times, what about NEPA? What about the Endangered Species Act? What about all these things that should prevent border wall? Well, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, thanks to the Real ID Act of 2005, has the authority to waive every law for border wall construction. They do not have the authority to waive NEPA. President Trump had made very clear and public his intention to do away with NEPA. And people wonder how COVID and this crisis, this public health crisis, this pandemic could be so terribly mismanaged by our president. And therein lies part of the answer. Crises create opportunities, and I bet none of you here know that the CARES Act, the COVID-19 Emergency Economic Recovery Act, waived NEPA. NEPA is no longer the law of the land.
Marianna, can you break down NEPA a little bit for clarification? Some of our
Okay, the National Environmental Policy Act was enacted to ensure that for government projects and for private projects, all of these steps, and there are a gazillion of them, have to be followed in order for projects to proceed. And these steps involve environmental studies and then full surveys to determine the impacts that these projects will have on our natural resources, whether that's our water or our wildlife or our lands, our air quality, different things. And that's all just now been swept off the table. For our energy security and economic recovery, as part of that, on July 30th, President Trump came to Midland, Texas, and signed 4 new permits for pipeline on the border, including behind the border wall, one just upstream from us in Laredo, Texas, where he also awarded the border wall construction contract to Tommy Fisher. And so this is a pipeline that will go across the Rio Grande River, which is the fresh water supply for more than 6 million people. And NEPA no longer applies. The Clean Water Acts, the Solid Waste Disposal Acts no longer apply to us.
Amy, you want to weave your question in that you from the chat there? Thanks, Mariana. It's a lot to take in.
It's more of a policy question that Mariana may not have the answer to, but you know, the money from the CARES Act has mostly been spent. And so is there a statute of limitations for this? Is there a point at which the CARES Act expires and then therefore this waiver no longer exists?
To my knowledge, regarding this waiver and the economic recovery it is supposed to support, there is no trigger to end it. There is no date or point of recovery that will nullify this. It presumably will take another act of Congress.
Yeah, that seems like they need to close that loophole.
Yeah, right. So a question about so people are really taking this, and it's probably a steep learning curve. It is for me, for a lot of us here. Mariana, so other than listening to this again and taking this down, are there resources for us to educate ourselves about this, and so that we can then educate our elected officials and who else? Is this, where would you point us toward?
Well, I would point you, as silly as it sounds, to our e-newsletter and our Facebook page. We publish a lot of news involving border wall on our Facebook page. And our e-newsletter and things like that, we often send out news and announcements with lots of links, even to our lawsuit filings and other things. So that's where I think people need to become educated. And another point, in the film, we talk about filing suit against the federal government based upon their de facto seizure of private property without any due process. And that is the part of our lawsuit that is moving forward, our Fifth Amendment claims. And if you, I know we've got people on this session from all over the country. At issue in this lawsuit is not the border wall, it is the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, an obscure act that gives Border Patrol the authority for warrantless, that means no warrant required, entry to private property, all private property within 25 miles of any US border. Over 100 million people in the United States live within 25 miles of any US border. And whether you know it or not, Border Patrol has the authority to enter your property with no warrant. They cannot enter your domicile, but they can enter your yard or your car. They can stand on your roof. And there they can do anything and everything they claim falls under the word patrolling.
Wow.
Amy just talked about loopholes. Our laws are full of them, and they're there often deliberately. And in almost 70 years, the word patrolling has never been defined. So and there's a good article that came out in The Intercept this week about Google artificial intelligence working with the private surveillance industries on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security and Border Patrol. And Border Patrol on our private property has installed video surveillance, audio surveillance, motion sensors. They fly drones overhead and literally come down in our faces. We now know from this Intercept article that they are also using surveillance that is deployed along the border to surveil and analyze text messages. They do that by virtue of intercepting everything your cell phone does through dirt box technology. All of these things they now claim are patrolling.
Wow.
So we're going forward in trial on the one issue that DHS reached out to negotiate away when we filed our suit. This has landmark potential for more than a third of all residents in the United States. And this is something that we think it's critical to educate people and our elected officials on, as all of our rights to privacy, all of our civil rights are being eroded daily by the NSA, by Border Patrol, by DHS, and other agencies we probably don't even know about.
Yeah, thank you. So get on your Facebook page, get on your newsletter, and wow, what a wealth of information. You talk about we, Mariana, and I'm wondering, and there's a question in the chat, are there other environmental groups that are working together on these issues?
Well, there are other groups for sure, and I would encourage you to follow or subscribe to all of them. So the Southern Borders Communities Coalition is doing great work and putting out great information. Defenders of Wildlife and Earth Justice, as well as the Sierra Club, are all doing great things on the borderlands. And Sierra Club in the lower Rio Grande Valley and the state of Texas has been leading the fight against LNG in the RGV. I would also encourage everyone to support the ACLU. They have been very helpful to us, as well as the lawyers at Earth Justice and the lawyers at the Texas Civil Rights Project. So I know many of you may be thinking about year-end giving. If you're in a position to do that, even $5 or $10, I have a running list each year, and I try to give when I can, and definitely at year-end, to these organizations that are, you know, walking the walk and talking the talk. They are really going to bat for all Americans. Right back to close that loop again from Amy, protecting the places and everything that support the lives of people and this planet.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody's putting those resources in there. And I think you'll be able to find those in the follow-up to this show as well. There was a moment when you talk about the day before you found the contractors that the woman, she's only covered for that moment, I think Dr. Jane Scott, right? And she died. And I just have this personal curiosity, like, were those connected? Was that just a total heartbreak to her? And if that's irrelevant, but it was in the film and I thought, oh, what is that?
Her death and the advent of this border wall battle, they were not physically connected. Dr. Jane Scott was the wife of Dr. Jeffrey Glassberg, and they too founded the North American Butterfly Association and the National Butterfly Center. She had cancer, and she had gone into hospice care a week or two before I found the contractors. And so we were all at the center sort of under stress already, knowing that her time to transition to the next world was nigh. And Dr. Glassberg had told me, you know, I need this time with Jane, and do not contact me for any reason, you know, unless the place is burned to the ground. And I mean, this is someone I communicate with daily, if not multiple times a day. So we were very mindful of that. And when I found these contractors doing this on the property, I took photos, which I texted to him with a brief explanation. And you know, this was equivalent to the place being on fire for us. And I just said, may I go to the media? And the only response I got from him for a couple of days was yes. And then we learned that she had passed the next morning. And so their connectedness for me is that, Jane was a fierce, brilliant woman. And I have to believe that her spirit is holding me up.
To go right to the beginning of the film, when an old woman dies, her soul becomes a butterfly. That's so beautiful. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Mariana. Amy, this might be a stretch, but I think this is part of our new capacity of looking, listening, learning. Is there anything in the film we can learn watching the migration of the butterflies, the migration of the humans? What would you weave in? Learnings from the film. I'm like, oh, come on, I'm watching.
Well, you know, I mean, I guess, sure. I mean, there's always something you can learn. You know, as far as like the migration of the butterflies, the migration of birds, how all of that is connected is actually, it's very well studied. I'd say the butterflies, we're still trying to figure out a lot of those mechanisms, but as far as like the flocking animals and how animals behave collectively has been modeled, and it's been used for everything from drones to different ways to organize your organization. So, you know, when we talk about, you know, learning from nature, you know, a lot of times the pretty things that we see, you're really looking at the forms that nature uses. So that's where you get the, you know, what she talked about in the film with, you know, even the very small little bumps on the shark skin and the bumps on the lotus leaf, and how those microstructures affect how that organisms, you know, performs the functions that it needs to of staying clean, all the way to wind turbines that are designed to, you know, work like whale fins. But, you know, those are forms, and those are things that we can kind of grasp onto. But when we're talking about looking to nature to learn, we're also looking at processes. We're looking about not just what is made, but how it's made. And then also systems, how it fits into this larger context. And I think, you know, as an architect, bringing it back to that, you know, buildings are systems. They're parts of larger systems of neighborhoods and communities and cities, and obviously ecoregions and beyond. So, you know, I think that there's always something to learn. And, you know, I think this, you know, but I think what you're also referencing is, you know, communities and cultures. And I think that, you know, I think that there is something you can learn as long as you also bring it down to the context of the people that are involved. And I would hate to say, okay, well, this is how butterflies migrate, and so therefore that means something for how people, that to me, that's a bridge that you cannot build without integrating the people that are actually involved into the conversation.
Absolutely. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't just note the important point of the feminine here, right? And the story that Mariana weaves through so many times about the silencing of women, the rape of the land, right? So I think it's such an invitation for especially those of us that, you know, all of us, but to really flock, come together around this and use our voices. So just so beautiful. I love the wisdom of being there at dawn, Mariana, when you have that moment of like my favorite time, like to be there at dawn was such a reminder to me to catch those liminal spaces. To me, the butterfly is such a metaphor and representation of transformation in those liminal spaces. And so the dawn and the dusk, those times there's a full moon coming, you know, just to be out and to open up to some insight and vision in these times. Wow. There is a question my team keeps putting up here, and I'm like, I don't know what the answer is. What's wrong with our Congress that they allow these kinds of policies, you know, to be unattached to these related bills? Do either of you have any wisdom around that? I just want to scream at it. So,
a couple of things, if I may. You talked about, and you asked Amy about these natural processes connection. And the butterfly and the link to the effeminate, and even dawn, and you saying, you know, the moon and all of these things, the denigration of the feminine is at the root of patriarchy and something that must be done away with. And we see that in policies and practice that harm LGBTQ persons and others. And it strikes at the very heart of environmental justice and how we care for Mother Earth, Gaia, again, the feminine. And you see that also with regard to our processes, our menstrual cycles and other things that are spoken of in unhealthy, unclean terms. We've got so much work left to do, you know. Another thing about what we can learn from this, Amy's film talks about what nature does is care for those places so that life can go on for 10,000 generations. Monarchs and their migratory patterns are a lesson in that. If we had 60 million monarchs in place on the landscape at all times, all year round, it would be unsustainable. Their life cycle and their migration and the way they use the land over time in these various places is a lesson in sustainability. And so that's one thing we can learn from that. And human beings have been migrating for millions of years so that we make the best use of our resources in each season, in each place. And stopping that with something like border wall and arbitrary boundaries and unhealthy public policies, those chickens are going to come home to roost. Those monarchs are going to not come home to roost. And I think that's what we're seeing now with the migration. Okay, so back to...
No, I'm so glad. Okay, we're adding that to the list of action items, team. All right, do away with the denigration of the feminine.
So you asked how Congress can do what they do.
Right.
Our elected officials don't work for us. They work for themselves. They work for re-election. They work for Citizens United. They work for corporate interest. That is why the border wall is a hurdle and a harvesting mechanism for for-profit prisons. You and I right now, the American taxpayer, we are the #1 client of GEO Group and Core Civic. And our congressional representative, Henry Cuellar, who is the second highest ranking Democrat on the Homeland Security Appropriations Committee, is also the second highest recipient of campaign funds from the GEO Group. So you wonder how Congress enacts policies like this. They're paid to do so. And as long as that is allowed to happen, as long as our government operates the way that it currently does, we will continue to have policies like this, whether it's the oil and gas companies or the for-profit prisons or, you know, the mining companies. I call them all the extractionists. You know, they're extracting our labor, our wealth, our minerals, everything from the landscape, our water. As long as that is how our representatives get to Congress, where they enact policies, and as long as we have lobbying the way we do, this is the way things will continue to go. It just is.
Yeah, wow. Beautiful, thanks for that. All right, noting our time and want to steer us to action, the film, the dialogue, and then action. So a last word from each of you before I move on to that. I know you've, in your answers, have given us some great ideas. Do you want to give me maybe one nugget for people to take away?
Amy, you go first.
Well, I have a couple of actions. I'm not sure if this is the same as what's going to be discussed in a little bit, but you know, I mean, I guess just in addition to what I guess I'll share at the end, just I guess echoing some of the comments that I'm seeing in the chat, is just get involved. You know, I mean, I think that, you know, yes, there are corruptions in our system, but we have seen where collective action, and I guess this also goes back to the conversation about the butterflies and collective animal behavior, collective action does work. You know, if you get enough voices that are amplified and all speaking in unison and speaking the same language to the same audience, those voices are amplified and our elected leaders will listen, but we have to work together. We can't be working at cross purposes.
Beautiful, thanks, Amy. Mariana, here's one vote, a write-in, Mariana for president. Yay.
Thank you, but never in a million years would I be able to, to manage that. I would reiterate what Amy said, take a lesson from the herd and, or from the flock, or, you know, and we have to act together. And also a lesson from the monarchs and migration. This is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And this began for us in 2016, 2017, and here we are in 2020, rolling into 2021, fighting the same fight. And the Department of Homeland Security and the State Department have been advocating for border wall and building barriers on and in the Rio Grande River, waiving the International Boundary and Water Commission. They've been working toward this goal, and this is documented for almost 15 years now. So government takes a very long view at what's happening. Like someone else wrote about climate change in the debate the other day. We may have people like Trump who deny climate change. We may have oil and gas companies spending billions of dollars and putting up, you know, sponsoring scientists without integrity to put out, you know, fake studies and news and whatever. But our government understands climate change. They understand what T. Boone Pickens, a Texas oil man, said a long time ago, which is that water is the new oil. We have to take that same long view, and we have to be in it for the long haul. We have to keep showing up en masse, the same way the monarchs migrate every year. Every fall they go south, every spring they come back, and we have to do that year in and year out, seasonally, midterms and presidential elections. In Texas, we have to do it during the year off for our state legislature and the year that they're in session. We cannot let up, and that's exhausting. And I know we all get fatigued. I know it takes a toll on your spirit, even perhaps on your physical health, definitely on your stamina. But we have to do it, you know, unless the plan really is to live on the moon or Mars or something. If you have already resolved that that's where your great grandchildren will go, we don't have a choice but to show up and speak up every day for our planet.
And thank you for modeling that. I think that, to me, this film is hopeful because how inspiring every actor in the film is, including you, Mariana. So thank you for that. I can just, your fierce determination rings in my soul. I love it. Collective action.
Zulema deserves all the props too. You know, she's sort of my role model in this. She has not given up, and she says, as long as I have breath in me, I will fight.
And sing.
Yes.
Stand before that and sing. It's just, yes. I could play the end of that, the beginning and the end of this, I could just play on tape over and over. Well, I love both of the actions you're drawing to. The collective action that each of you are suggesting fits perfectly in our theme all year of the power of we. So I just wanted to name that. There are lots of communities to become part of here. And thank you both. If you can stay, I do want to say thank you. Thank you. I could talk to both of you all afternoon. I want to start, I think we have a slide with action items, and maybe we can name a couple of those together as we see those. Thanks, Garen. Beautiful. If there's something here that either of you want to add on to, I think we've talked about almost all of these, you know, get outside. I heard Amy say that early on. We see Mariana doing that in the film. So beautiful. Plant native plants. I've seen in the chat, folks are already doing that. That might have drawn them here. In Chicago here, we have the West Cook Wild Ones, which is wonderful. Volunteer to restore. And of course, vote. We're right in the voting season right now. One of the most important things we can do, get outside and take a walk and go to your polling place. Lots of places. Subscribe. Thank you for updating that to the e-newsletter there. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to our entire team. Thanks to Mariana and Amy. I would love folks that are still with us. This is awesome. We still have 54 people with us here. If you could put in the chat something that you are drawn or inspired to do. We'd love to, if we were all together, I might even have you stand up and commit to it, find people to do it with. So who is ready to harness the power of we here that could share in the chat that we could read off? What do you feel compelled to do? Watching these beautiful films, listening to these inspiring women. We will follow up. There have been questions. You will get a follow-up with the recording of the film, these resources. You can watch it again and again. You can share it with your friends, invite them. I think that's what I'm personally really inspired to do. I learned so much today to go back, get some of those details so that I can really be a more powerful advocate for this work. Plant some native plants, take a nice long walk. Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Mariana. Beautiful. So thank you all for participating, for being part of this. This is the power of we coming together in our COVID cocoons here. And we will each take with us, and what I love is just to uplift that, that each of us have our work to do, and it's different. We can't all be Amy taking children out and educating them in the wild, or Mariana, I don't know how you walk up the steps of Congress, but I love to learn more about that. So thank you. Can we unmute now, team? Would be a good time for our applause, our collective applause, to really feel the power of we. One of the hard things about being on Zoom is we can't really feel each other as much. So maybe we could take a moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Just asked everybody to unmute.
All right, if everybody could unmute, we can express our collective appreciation for all of this. The team at One Earth is amazing to work with, how they set this all up, and Miss Anna Garcia Doyle, who invites us all in. It's so beautiful. Thanks to Garen and Aaron and everybody who's helped set us up. So thank you. Here are some other links. Join us for another screening. Go on through tomorrow. Be educated, get educated, vote.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Susan, and thank you everyone who spent the afternoon with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well, everyone.
That was really